A country already battling unemployment, poverty, collapsing public services, and rising crime is now facing another dangerous crisis, anger in the streets turning into violence against foreign nationals. Videos spreading across social media have shocked many South Africans. Men being chased, people assaulted in broad daylight, crowds accusing foreign nationals of stealing jobs, overloading hospitals, and contributing to crime. And now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has finally stepped in with a public warning. But here's the uncomfortable question nobody can ignore anymore. Why are so many ordinary South Africans feeling desperate enough to support these protests in the first place? Because this story is no longer just about immigration. It's about economic collapse, political frustration, broken trust in government, and communities that feel abandoned. And what happened next raised serious questions about whether South Africa is slowly losing control of a crisis that has been building for years. If you want to stay updated on the biggest political scandals, national crises, and investigative stories shaping Southern Africa, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Because this situation is moving fast, and the consequences could affect the entire country. President Ramaphosa's statement came after days of mounting tension across parts of South Africa. Videos began circulating online showing groups confronting foreign nationals, demanding identification documents, and in some cases violently attacking people accused of being in the country illegally. The scenes immediately triggered painful memories for many South Africans. Because this is not the first time the country has experienced anti-foreigner violence. For years, tensions have been simmering beneath the surface. In poorer communities especially, frustration has been growing over unemployment, housing shortages, overloaded clinics, crime, and a feeling that government has failed to protect struggling citizens. And in moments of crisis, foreign nationals often become the visible target. Ramaphosa condemned the attacks directly, saying the violent protests and criminal acts do not represent South Africa's values or government policy. He accused certain groups of exploiting legitimate frustrations under the false banner of community activism. That line was important, because the president appeared to draw a distinction between genuine public frustration and individuals allegedly using the chaos to promote lawlessness or political agendas. He specifically criticized people stopping others in the streets to check identification documents and conducting searches of private property, saying only state officials have authority to do that. In other words, the government is now warning that some communities may be taking immigration enforcement into their own hands. And that is where things become extremely dangerous. Because once citizens begin acting like law enforcement, tensions can spiral out of control very quickly. But this is the part few people are talking about. At the same time that Ramaphosa condemned the violence, he also acknowledged something many South Africans have been demanding government admit publicly for years. He admitted undocumented migration is placing pressure on healthcare systems, housing, municipal services, governance, and social stability. That statement matters politically, because critics have repeatedly accused the government of dismissing public concerns about illegal immigration as xenophobia without addressing the real pressures communities face daily. Now the president himself is openly recognizing those pressures exist. And suddenly, the political conversation has shifted. To understand how South Africa reached this point, you have to go back years. South Africa has long been one of the continent's biggest economic hubs. People from neighboring countries including Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Somalia, and elsewhere have migrated to South Africa seeking jobs, safety, business opportunities, or better living conditions. For many migrants, South Africa represented hope. But over time, the country's own economic conditions began deteriorating. Unemployment surged to some of the highest levels in the world. Youth unemployment became catastrophic. Service delivery protests increased. Corruption scandals weakened public trust. Electricity blackouts crippled businesses. Crime remained high, and slowly, frustration inside poor communities intensified. Many South Africans began asking why they were still struggling after decades of democracy. Then political movements began capitalizing on those frustrations. Groups and activists emerged calling for mass deportations of undocumented migrants. Some accused foreign nationals of operating illegal businesses, participating in organized crime, or competing unfairly for jobs and resources. Others argued migrants were simply being scapegoated for government failures. And that debate has divided South Africa for years. But here's where things get disturbing. Social media has dramatically intensified tensions. Videos, rumors, accusations, and emotional posts spread rapidly online, often faster than verified information. A single confrontation can suddenly trigger nationwide outrage within hours. In the latest wave of incidents, videos showing foreign nationals allegedly being beaten circulated widely across platforms, reigniting fears of another large-scale xenophobic crisis. Critics immediately accused authorities of reacting too slowly. Others argued communities were only acting because they believe government has failed to enforce immigration laws properly. And that contradiction sits at the center of this entire crisis. South Africans are demanding stronger immigration enforcement. But the government is warning against vigilantism. The question is whether the state can still maintain control before tensions escalate further. Now, let's look carefully at the timeline of what unfolded. Tensions reportedly began building in several communities where demonstrations against illegal immigration had already been taking place. Protesters claimed public services were overwhelmed and demanded tougher action against undocumented migrants. Then videos started emerging online showing confrontations between groups of locals and foreign nationals. In some clips, individuals were allegedly questioned about identification documents. In others, violence appeared to break out publicly. The footage spread rapidly across South African social media, sparking fierce national debate. Some users condemned the attacks immediately, calling them criminal and inhumane. Others defended the protests, arguing communities had reached breaking point after years of government inaction. As pressure mounted, President Ramaphosa released his statement condemning the violence while simultaneously acknowledging the strain undocumented migration places on public systems. That balancing act revealed just how politically sensitive this issue has become, because the government now faces pressure from multiple sides at once. Human rights organizations want stronger protection for migrants and stricter action against vigilante violence. Communities want visible enforcement against undocumented migration. Political opponents want to portray the government as weak and ineffective. And foreign governments are closely watching how South Africa handles the situation. What happened next raised even more questions. Ramaphosa warned that some individuals were performing functions reserved for state officials, including stopping people for identification checks and searching properties. But critics immediately asked, why are citizens feeling empowered to do this in the first place? Is it because they no longer trust institutions to act? Or because enforcement systems themselves are overwhelmed? Those questions go far beyond immigration. They touch on something deeper happening inside South Africa right now: declining confidence in state authority. Because when citizens begin taking enforcement into their own hands, it often signals frustration with formal institutions. And history shows that can quickly destabilize communities. This is also why many analysts are warning against oversimplifying the crisis. Some people frame the issue purely as xenophobia. Others frame it purely as illegal immigration. But the reality is far more complicated. Economic desperation, unemployment, political frustration, crime fears, and weak governance are all colliding at the same time. And foreign nationals are caught directly in the middle of that collision. This is the part few politicians fully admit publicly. Many undocumented migrants themselves are also vulnerable people escaping economic collapse, instability, or violence in their own countries. Some run small businesses. Some work low-paying jobs. Many locals refuse. Some are undocumented because immigration systems move slowly or inefficiently. But at the same time, there are legitimate concerns around border management, documentation systems, criminal networks, and pressure on public infrastructure. And separating those realities from political rhetoric is becoming increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, public reaction has exploded online. Social media platforms are flooded with emotional arguments from every direction. Some South Africans say enough is enough and accuse government of ignoring struggling citizens for too long. Others warn the country is heading toward dangerous mob justice. Human rights activists are condemning the violence and calling for stronger protections for migrants. Political commentators are accusing leaders of failing to address immigration problems before tensions reach this level. And international observers are again raising concerns about South Africa's reputation globally, because xenophobic violence has damaged the country's image before. Past outbreaks led to deaths, looting, destruction of businesses, and diplomatic tensions with neighboring countries. Some African nations previously criticized South Africa harshly after attacks on foreign nationals. And now their fierce history could repeat itself. But here's where the story becomes even more politically explosive. Ramaphosa's statement may signal a tougher government approach toward undocumented migration going forward. While condemning violence, he also emphasized the need to deal decisively and legally with illegal immigration because of risks to social stability and national security. That language was strong, and many people believe it reflects growing political pressure ahead of future elections and mounting public frustration over border control. The government now faces a difficult balancing act. If authorities crack down aggressively on undocumented migrants, they risk accusations of targeting vulnerable communities. If they fail to act visibly, frustration inside communities may continue growing. And if violent protests continue spreading, South Africa could face serious economic and diplomatic consequences. Because investors pay attention to instability, tourism reacts to unrest.